Yeah. Sina has been discussing that he would want the gas estimation to the each simulate, and then we have been discussing should that be the new method or should be built in right into the current version. And I would imagine that we should be change the spec again to add that. So for in that case, should be a new method. But then it's a bit annoying because then you have to run the new method and then you need to run the each simulate after that. Even though it could be just one call to each simulate, you do everything.
How would it look if it was integrated? What would the API be like?
If you leave the gas limit out, then it would always estimate it for that method, and after it has estimated, then it kind of includes that in the transaction, and then it would continue with the processing. So you could do the gas estimation for multiple transactions in a row at the same time.
Yeah, I don't think I would do it that way because there's estimating
There
gas
can be
is not cheap, and I would worry that doing it every time is unnecessary since most of the time you don't actually need it. Like anytime you're just doing a call just to get state.
yeah, and we're thinking of that there could be a client parameter where you could limit how many transactions it can estimate it for. And then we could agree on some default for that. But yeah, I think for cases where you just want to use it as a call and you don't actually want to make a transaction, then you would be estimated gas for no reason why you would be just using some kind of maximum amount of the gas.
Yeah.
Well, then it could be that instead of setting gas limit to undefined, you set it to some string value or something like estimate or something like so. You would be more explicit about that.
I would be okay with that. Like, make it so within the simulate, it's possible to tell it to do a gas estimation.
I'm just not fan of that we keep modifying the spec all the time. I'm keep adding stuff to that, and at some point we should just make the each simulate v2 and then add stuff to that.
So I think if the changes are purely additive, then it's possible to do without versioning to next ETH simulate.
But even with that, then if some RPC is supporting each simulate, you don't know which version they're supporting. You just know that they're supporting V1, which would be any of those versions.
Right. This gets down to capability detection and some sort of handshake with the RPC server. So you can ask the RPC server, do you support X, Y, and Z ahead of time? So that way you don't have to probe for it. Unfortunately, even though many people have asked for that over time, no one has ever written a spec for it. And so we don't actually have a way of doing that.
And I think even that it would be difficult. Then you would need to ask it to do support each simulate and then do support these features of the each simulate. So in that case, I think it would be also better if you would have each simulate v2.
I hate building a whole new version of something just for one feature that you could add.
No, one option would be to create a new method where you just estimate gas with multicall. And then it would return just the gas amounts and it wouldn't return the actual result of the simulations. But I feel it's a bit waste because it calculates those anyway, but it doesn't return them. But I guess that's what the current ETH estimate gas does, that it throws away a lot of results that it could return to the user.
Yes, which is very frustrating for app developers. So I think we should.
Why do you mean it's frustrating for app developers? Well, now they need to run each simulate first and then they run the said transaction. So there's two round trips, or it could be kind of like only one.
It's just overall wasteful to, in many cases, maybe even most cases, you need to do two things. One, you want to find out will this call succeed or not. So if it's not going to succeed, I want to surface that to the user with as much information as possible, such as error codes or things like that. And then two, you need to know if it does succeed, how much gas is it going to take, so I can properly construct the transaction. And right now, apps have to do both. So they have to make an ETH call and then they have to do an ETH simulate. Sometimes they'll just do the ETH simulate because the ETH simulate will, I think these days, return at least the revert reason, but you don't get the other details that ETH simulate would provide, such as event logs and transfers and stuff like that. And so I think that especially with ETH simulate, where we're returning more rich data for the simulation, unlike ETH call, which return very bare bones data. I think people are
But-
going to often want to do an ETH simulate on the app level, and they're going to want to do an estimate gas. And so having them call twice is just doubling the amount of work the node has to do.
But even with each simulate, if the transaction fails, then we are not returning the logs. So it's not in a way better than that.
Really, I thought we were.
No, we're
Oh,
just
you-
returning error code, not the logs up into the point of failure.
Mm.
We would need
thought
a
we were.
tracing support for that.
Yeah, I thought we were returning logs. I thought we had a discussion about that, but really not.
Maybe we had discussion about it, but I don't remember why we decided. Except that's how it used to work before, and I don't know if the clients or EVM somehow works so that it cannot return those. I'm not sure. Sina would probably know. I think when the transaction failed, we should get better information why it failed anyway. But that's what you need tracing call to do. And I usually use Tenderly for those cases when it fails, and then I don't know why it fails, and then Tenderly is somewhat good in explaining why the things fail. But it would be
Yeah,
nice
but I
that the
think
each simulate could be do that.
I think they trace everything.
Yeah.
This gets back to. I definitely think that there's more data the node could easily get for relatively low cost that we could return. Figuring out what that set is, what is the intersection of that set for all clients, where it's all clients can easily get the data and save it and return it. I'm not sure how trivial that is.
Well, one option is to make that new method that is the tracing each simulate. And I think Sina was discussing at some point, but I don't know if he has tried it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what to do with that gas estimation. Is it very important that it needs to be included, or is we can also implement so that the clients are implementing themselves and they're doing multiple each simulate calls, but that's a kind of even heavier.
Yeah, I would want to spec something out. We at least all agree on it.
Yeah, but should it then be a new method? That's the question.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not a fan of a new method for this. I do think we need to spec it out. I just don't think it should be a new method. I think we should just include it in the current method.
Yeah, just that then there's going to be multiple versions of each simulate out there, which is all the V1 versions, but they are not actually V1 version, but they are V1 and then something else.
I mean, is this something that? What is the workaround right now for apps? If an app wants to do an estimate, they just do it themselves manually.
No, there's the ETH estimate gas, but it just works for one call. And
Right, but
I
if you've
think
got
in the future, in a way, it still will work for the most of the cases, except you want to build that kind of simulation stack.
Maybe the first question is to find out what the behavior of all clients is if they receive an unexpected value for the gas limit, like a string. Like what happens if there's a string in the gas limit? Do they and probably return invalid params?
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah, okay. I'm thinking maybe we could just, apps could always fall back, but invalid params means they can't just kind of blindly test it.
Well, what do you mean that they can? Well, they would make that call and then they figure out that they cannot do that.
So what I was thinking, which I don't think will work, is they make the call with the V2 stuff, or the V1.1 stuff, meaning they specify that they want to get gas estimation. And then if they don't get a gas estimation back, that's fine. They just move on with the traditional way of ETH estimate gas. And if they do get a gas estimation back, it saves them a round trip. But if the client is going to crash in that case, then that's not a good idea.
Well, you cannot do the ETH estimate gas if you are trying to do multiple transactions in a row. Like, what would be the point of the ETH simulate?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a way we can make it so we don't need a new version. So it's on my mind right now.
Hey guys.
Hey, we are trying to think of how do we add the gas estimation to the ETH simulate.
Right.
But yeah,
Anything? Any conclusions?
No good ones.
I think the annoying thing if we implemented the current version is that then we have kind of like two versions of each simulate. We have the older version and then they have the newer version out there, and then the client in a way cannot know which one they are using. Well, eventually that everyone would probably be using the new version, but it's annoying that we have the V1, but it's still there's new multiple versions of the V1.
Yeah.
I think
And
the
what
easiest,
about adding a new method?
yeah, I think adding new method would be something like multi-estimate gas or something, or it simulate estimate gas.
The other option is we just start working on. The other option is we just start working on ETH Simulate v2 and we collect all the things that we think should be in it, and this is one of them. So we do have a new version, but it comes with more than just this. Like I wouldn't want to do a whole new version just to make it so it can estimate gas.
I would argue this is more urgent than some other features we've been talking about for V2. I would personally like to see this happen as early as possible, because it does seem like some users kind of need it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Interceptor could certainly use it. We do this janky thing that gets it wrong all the time.
Not all the time, but in the cases where there's the gas opcode being used. And it seems like quite many contracts actually use it.
So guys, I'm a bit out of the loop. So the problem is that ETH simulate doesn't estimate gas.
Correct. And if you've got a simulation stack, there's no reliable way to estimate the gas of one of the calls.
Okay, so
You
we
do
would
janky things.
like. Okay, so we would like to add kind of either V2 or ETH simulate gas or whatever that would simulate gas. Okay, question mark from me. Because the standard simulate gas so calculate gas or whatever. How was it? Well, whatever.
Estimate gas.
Estimate gas. Oh, that's yeah. I just went out of my mind. Is doing potentially multiple executions of the transaction with narrowing down the actual gas limit, right? And seeing where it fails and where it doesn't fail. In ETH simulate context, that can be potentially really resource heavy, or do we have any better idea?
Well, I don't think it's any more resource heavy for a single transaction, because you'd execute the prior transaction, however, and then you would re-execute multiple times the next transaction, but you would store your prior state, like you wouldn't discard it. And so that way you can do the same kind of search without having to re-execute the whole stack every time.
Well, yeah. Like in essence, it's not something more resource intensive, but just by ETH simulate itself being potentially more resource intensive because you can just feed more transactions there. Like, is that a potential problem? We can say not, but yeah, just potentially you can fit, for example, 10 transactions, and now you do this 10 transactions, each of them n times, right? So it's like hundreds potentially even of execution.
As so you're saying just that ETH simulate has potential for a single JSON RPC method call to cause a lot of load on the client. And if we add simulation onto that, that can potentially magnify the amount of load you can give to a client with a single RPC call, right?
Yeah, and that would potentially would have to, be countered with good limits, and that could potentially limit that functionality, right? What you can achieve. That's kind of my question mark there.
I
like
think
the
there's
right-
limits how many estimations you can calculate. So if you make each simulate call with 10 transaction with all missing gas estimation, then that would be huge load for the node. And I think the clients could have some kind of parameter on how many kind of times they can do the estimation, because that is not in the under the gas account, so it should be somehow be limited.
Sorry. So I think the way to solve this seems like we should just make every single estimation execution. So if your estimation strategy involves bisecting, running the function over and over, we add each of those attempts to your total gas you can spend in a single JSON RPC call, which I believe all the clients have limits on, right? And so if you do an ETH simulate and you tell it estimate gas for these 10 transactions and it requires a complicated bisection to find, then you have to pay for all that. And so your per JSON RPC gas utilization limit that the clients have, just, it adds up. And so as a application developer, you want to do two things. One, you want to make it so it's easy for clients to estimate the gas of your transaction. And two, you want to make it so you're not doing too much, otherwise you're going to get rate limited. The estimate gas that the clients do right now, does it have a happy path where if there is nothing fancy or about the gas estimation, it only needs to execute once, or does it always need to execute at least twice, or does it always need to execute 8 times for the bisection?
It's only very limited happy paths. Like if it's only a transfer, then you can know the gas value, or maybe 1 or 2 cases like this.
You don't have anything in the clients where it's like run the transaction once and then run the transaction again with exactly the gas that it costs and see if it still works, so you at least only get 2 in a happy path? There's nothing like that?
I can check exact
You guys always
logic.
go straight to
I believe
bisecting?
not. I believe yes. Well, because, okay, so wait, how much gas limit are you going to give it in the first place?
So my thinking was, in most transactions, I believe, you can give it a gas limit of, let's say, 30 million or whatever, and then you execute the transaction, you keep track of how much gas was used along the way. And in theory, changing the gas limit to that number should make the transaction still work. In that case, that means there was no gas introspection going on and everything's happy. And so you basically just execute twice, once with 30 million gas, and then once with whatever gas you estimated with that 30 million. And then you'd only do the bisection if that second run failed, which means you've got some sort of gas introspection going on in the contract.
Do you feel it's easier to do that? You always add some kind of like global class, and then always when you are doing the estimation, then it adds to that or subtracts from that, instead of just kind of limiting how many gas estimation you can do. I would feel it's quite complicated to add a new gas thing there.
So I think we had that, Micah, that logic you're saying at some time ago, but people were complaining about it, and we had to change it to be more explore the gas space because of something. I don't remember the details, but I know that it didn't work well.
Really?
Yeah, it was also like a bit weird for us, but I would have to look it up. What was the problem?
If you do find that, let me know. I don't expect you to go looking that up, but I'd be curious why that doesn't work. Like, I would think that Do you happen to know, were people complaining that the gas was estimating incorrectly, or was underestimating or overestimating? Do you remember that much?
I think underestimating actually in a lot of
That's
places.
usually the bigger problem.
I'm confused. I don't know how you could underestimate, because you estimate once, you get a number, you try it with that number, and then if it works, great, you're done. Like, I don't understand how that could possibly underestimate.
I'm not sure if I understood too, but that was the reality. Let me try finding it.
Well, one challenge here is also, I think each estimate gas works really different for each node implementation. So that's not really standardized what search is done or what happens there. So that's also it's one point where the things are or the different clients are returning different values for them if you do it in the each simulate. But maybe that's something that we can be okay with. I think Get, for example, very recently they modified how the each simulate works, like maybe this year or last year, for example, and then they use different algorithm or something.
Yeah, the modification was just to limit the binary search to have some bigger error margin, and I think we also adapted it. So not to just fine tune the estimation to the last one gas, right? But have some kind of okay, if it's under this error margin, we're fine. We don't have to estimate to exact, integer value. It's like with some.
But I would imagine that you still do it a bit different than Get, or it's not exactly the
No,
same.
we are doing more or less the same at the moment.
So wait, but I guess the point that Kim is trying to make is it's hard to standardize the exact value because it's an estimate and every client might do it differently. So we cannot rely on the fact that they will all return exactly the same value. And we shouldn't probably. Is that the point?
Yeah, well, we could write in the spec how it's done, but I don't know if we want or are we fine that different clients are returning bit different estimates.
I think we actually want to give some latitude for clients to improve on their estimation strategy. Like, both clients did recently. They both changed their estimation strategy because they found a better way.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think this is something that we can necessarily enforce.
I think we can enforce it, but I don't know if we should. But it's just something that we understand that then the results can be a bit different. But I think the bigger question is how it's going to be implemented. Do we want to implement the current implementation, or do we add new method, or do we implement it in the V2? I think those are the three options that we have. Like currently we already have the ETH estimate gas and then ETH call and each send transaction all in a way separately.
Yeah, like I said, though, it's very wasteful. Like, we're talking about how we can make it so it doesn't overload the RPC server, and I feel like the first thing we can do is just not be so wasteful and make it so users can do a single call instead of needing to do two for the same thing. How about ETH simulate V1 with estimate?
Okay,
And then we come up with. Go ahead.
I will send some issues that we have with gas estimation that were complaining before we changed. So when we were trying to do that, maybe if Micah is smarter than me, why this failed?
It seems unlikely, but I can take a look.
Yeah, I think we were just like gave up and say, okay, we'll just follow Gef at this moment at some point. No, I remember I knew at some point why it was wrong, but I don't remember now.
Guess your brain is full.
Yeah,
Need to increase the gas limit.
Marek is my external memory in normal normal places. So, but he's not here at the moment. So, yeah, I've sent few issues that we had with that
You,
approach to Telegram. Let me take a deeper look on them. Maybe I'll remember why.
but yeah, we also had recently problems with the Gnosis safe because they are using the gas, or they're doing something weird with the gas stuff.
I mean, so we can take a look at this from different angles. One is complexity. I think so. This is, I think, one reason why we should leave it out of ETH estimate, because it's just becoming a Swiss Army knife that does everything. And the other one, yeah, what Micah said would be an argument to put it in is simulate. I was also trying to think about this from a use case perspective. Is it that you would always need to do the simulation when you do the estimate gas? Like, are these
Yes.
use cases always coupled together?
I wouldn't say always, but it is common. So you have one call that gives you very detailed results of a transaction, and you have another call that tells you how much gas that transaction is going to use. In an app, you often want both of those things. You want to have detailed results of what will happen when this transaction is executed, and you want to prep the transaction for submission, which requires getting the gas estimate. And so in many cases, I don't want to say all cases, but in many cases, an app will do both because it needs both pieces of data. And so it would be nice if we didn't have to hammer the node with two separate calls that do exactly the same thing on the node. They just return different subsets of results, which then the user has to combine together. It'd be better if the user could just make one call, get both sets of results back, which the client has anyways, and return that. Now what we could do is do like an ETH simulate estimate gas function, and that returns all the data that ETH simulate returned plus the gas estimate, in which case the user could only call the ETH estimate gas. But at that point, we might as well just call it ETH simulate v2, I feel like.
And what if the user only needs the estimate gas?
I mean, if they only need to estimate gas, I believe on the client side, the same amount of work needs to be done either way. It's just a question of what is included in the result set. And so the client in both cases still needs to run the whole simulation. It still needs to run all the blocks. It still needs to do all the work. It just, what does it return is the only question. And so another option is we could do ETH simulate v2 and have some sort of options where the user can specify what data they want back. So they can say, I don't need receipts back. I don't need blocks back. I don't need this back. I don't need that back. And then sort of like how I don't know if you guys are familiar with working with the graph, where you kind of specify this is the set of things that I want in response to this query. And then on the back end then does all the same work. It just returns different sets. That way you're not overloading your network with unnecessary results. I wouldn't want to do something as complicated as the graph implementation, though.
Right. I'm personally okay with these options. I think at this point it would be nice if or Nethermind just starts prototyping this and seeing if any issues arise. But I just saw that, sorry, this is a bit of a change of topic, but I saw that Rohit left. I was wondering what happened with the timestamp discussion. Did you guys talk about that as well, or?
We haven't, I think, talked here. So I don't know. Marek from Nethermind really dislike one timestamp because it's unstandard. So for Nevermind, we have a configurable parameter, and we configured it for all our standard networks that tell us what's the slot time. So we would generally love to just follow that and have it done like that instead of producing a timestamp that is unrealistic. But yeah, that's kind of.
Why do you have that
Okay.
list? Where it's used?
Well, we don't have the list, but we have a default config for each network we officially support, and we put that parameter there.
What happens if that config is out of sync with the consensus client?
What do you mean
consensus
by
client,
that?
like
That the
the consensus client tells you, hey, the timestamp for the next block is 14 seconds, but your config says 12. Do
okay,
you just kind of ignore the config?
yeah, I would still use the config because I think it's nothing like consensus based depend on it, so it would be updated with the next release, right? And in terms of, there's a different thing probably because in practice this is every 12 seconds, and when do we like start the period that we are working from? That's a different question. But probably based on the parent block, yeah, we could do that. So that's not a big deal.
What about for blockchains that have sub-second times? Is it
Well,
a
we
rational
don't.
number?
No, we don't support rational numbers there because the timestamp doesn't support rational numbers.
Right. So
Only fractions.
you basically it's minimum value of 1, or is it minimum value of 0? I guess is the question.
I think 0. We can do it as 0.
Okay. And this config option is used where, other than here?
Ah, that's a good question. Let me double check.
Maybe Ethcall uses it.
I'm guessing that kind of global config for whole chain. So then, and
Well,
then
we
the
have a
Determined wouldn't
kind
be
of
actually using all of it.
well, we kind of have a local config, right, for each chain. So, okay, something in the health check service, in the merge plugin, we use it for something. Okay, that's nothing important. When we are building blocks, how long to improve the blocks, for example, when to stop improving the block, right? Because
Oh,
we
I
are
see.
because we are expecting the call from the CL, right, to get the block, and at some point we know that we kind of passed this mark. It doesn't make sense to try to build it again.
Use
And
it to
if
optimize. Predict it. You can predict when the CL is going to ask you the next question based on the
well,
block
up to
time.
the point when it still makes sense to try to improve the current block, right? And at some point, yeah, maybe it won't just ask about it, and it's because it, I don't know, took from MEV or something, and there's no point of doing that.
You don't want to waste time doing work you don't need to do if you can guess that you're already past time. Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay, what is it doing here? Oh, when we are trying to predict fork choice rules for next block, and that is used to calculate base fee in transaction pool but that would be on hard forks, right? And potentially if the transaction will yeah.
I thought fork choice was almost entirely by the CL these days.
Generally yes, but it's for transaction pool. But we do have potential forks now on timestamps.
Oh, I see. You're talking about for scheduled hard forks.
Yes, for scheduled hard forks, right? But we need to have this data for we need to have a timestamp to get the data for future release spec. When where we can in gas estimation, we are also using header timestamp plus next block, so plus seconds per block per slot. So we are using it in a few places to kind of estimate what will happen next, right?
Like you're not using it for consensus stuff, but you can use it to
No.
make predictions about the future that make it so your client can perform better and do a better job at what it does.
Yes, exactly.
And so Geth does not have a similar config. Is that my understanding? At least not yet.
No, not as far as I know. We don't have something because also we can just assume the block times to be that of Ethereum mainnet. So even if we use, I don't believe we use the 12 seconds anywhere. Maybe we're in the transaction pool and I don't know it, but then again, we don't need the config per network because, well, yeah.
Only support Geth, or sorry, only support mainnet.
Yeah. Well, mainnet and the testnets.
Yeah. So I'm, like I mentioned in chat, I have a weak preference for 1 second, just because I don't know, it seems like a very reasonable default if you live in a world with many blockchains, and the user can always override it. So I'm not too worried. That being said, I am not opposed to setting it to mainnet timestamp. And in the case of Nethermind, that could be whatever the config says. And in the case of Geth, maybe that just means 12 seconds hard coded. I'm not opposed to. We would need to make sure that this somehow gets remembered to be updated when hard forks happen that may change that time. So if the CL eventually goes to 14 seconds or 10 seconds or whatever, we'll want to make sure that both Geth and Nevermind get an update. It sounds like Nethermind already has a process in place for this. One thing I'd worry a little bit about is that we just kind of forget that Geth has the timestamp being used in some random place in ETH Simulate. But in theory, the Hive test would catch that. Is that correct?
Can we do with the get that kind of client variable is made somehow, but it's just always 12 seconds. And then the implementations can choose what they want to put there.
And is Geth opposed to just making this a parameter?
What kind of parameter?
Like a CLI parameter, for example.
CLI flag.
Yeah.
I don't see why though. Like, I would rather have it as constant because if we're talking about it changing during a hard fork, then you wouldn't want to override that through the flag anyway. And you'd want to update the code base to actually reflect the new timestamp, like the time slot times.
Okay.
And
As you wish.
it's something that can be overridden in ETH Simulate. So if somebody wants a specific timestamp increment, then they can just go ahead and provide all the timestamps.
Yeah, true. But still, make easier for people who fork you. But
Yeah, well, no, not exactly, because then everybody who will run a fork of Geth, like for base, then they will have to have this flag. At that point, I think I would rather just change this parameter, this constant in the base fork and be done with it. So that because yeah, it's like, do you want to put the work on the fork maintainers or the fork users?
And I think that kind of constant would be good as well. It's clearly explained what it does.
Mm.
Yeah, well, I'm okay with either. My position is held very weakly, so.
Well, I think there's three options that even we keep it as it is, or we put it to 12 seconds, or then we put it to what the blockchain is kind of saying that it should be. There's kind of like three options.
I assumed that third one, the second one, wasn't actually an option anyone wanted. I assumed it was either the client set it to the current blockchain, so in Geth that would be via constant, in Nethermind that'd be via config file, or we just set it to 1 second. Is anyone advocating for just universally hard coding it to 12 seconds?
I am fine with that as well.
Wait, but so what is the difference with setting it to constant 1 and constant 12? So this is what I'm
well,
what I'm
you're
missing
getting
here.
not realistic outputs on
Right,
main
but for
net.
both cases, right? For both, if it's 1 or if it's 12.
12 is
I
more
think-
realistic if we are in the mainnet.
So
Well,
one has the advantage of it works. It's one everywhere. So if we set it to one, it's one everywhere, no matter what blockchain you're on. It's just always one. If we set it to 12, then technically what we're setting it to is the block time of the blockchain you're currently working with.
I don't think necessarily, because it could be just mainnet specific and it's set 12 in the mainnet, and the mainnet is kind of what we care about most. That's the option with the 12. Like
Right, so,
one is settings for 1 second is kind of like it's not good anywhere. And the 12 seconds is good in
yeah,
mainnet, and
exactly,
otherwise it's kind of
exactly.
like with 12 seconds it's only good in the mainnet. And
So it sounds like everybody wants 12 seconds, except I'm the only one arguing for one. So why don't we switch to 12? And then it sounds like Nethermind will have that be configurable via their config files. And it sounds like Geth will have that just hard coded. And that's okay, because Geth generally only works with Ethereum mainnet, or that's what it's targeting net. And Nethermind is trying to build something that works on lots of networks. And so it's perfectly fine for you guys to have different ways of storing that 12.
I guess with the spec we could find it's 12 seconds, but then it depends on the network.
Oh, I see. Yeah, we have to decide what to put in the spec, huh?
Well,
Yeah,
Of
so
course,
yeah,
network block time. So in the spec, I would say it just lists as network block time. And then you can maybe also say this is 12 seconds for mainnet at the moment, at the time of this writing, or whatever.
that sounds good to me.
And then if Ethereum mainnet switches to 10 seconds, then presumably Geth would update the constant to
Yeah.
be 10.
I can live with that.
Okay.
Okay, so if we have this out of the way, what about potential other hash conflicts? Do we have a plan to address them? Rohit, have you
But
been
any-
looking into that? Maybe you can weigh in. I see you're back. Rohit, you're
It's
muted.
not.
Oh, sorry. I was looking into other issues where some of the tests are failing because of minor string mismatch or error code were different. For hash mismatch, for the test, I'll look into it. The test that mentioned in the issue board, where it says that neither man get disagree on block as that test is passing right now. It's about the test is called override all in block state calls. So that test is passing. But the other test, I think I have brought down the number of failing tests from, I guess it was 83 to 75. I'll try to reduce it further.
if you have those cases where the error messages are not matching, then that's fine. It's not in the spec that the error message can be whatever. It's more important that the error codes are matching. But
Yeah,
even that would be a good scenario that we are Nethermind and Get are failing in the same places. And after we get that, then I would care more about the error codes.
The error codes were different too. For Nethermind, we didn't have error codes where we mentioned the maximum number of blocks that can be simulated. I think it's 256, right?
That's a client parameter, but I think the default was 256, yeah. But if you can get all the case where all the kind of happy cases working, and then and in the error case both clients are erroring, then that's already a really good situation. Of course, we want error codes to match as well, but I don't think that's so critical compared to the other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And for hash mismatches for other tests, I'll look into it. Lukesh.
Yes.
Yeah, I am saying that for hash mismatches for other tests, when I am done with all those
Okay.
minor.
Okay. But we need to some kind of probably dump the blocks, right, in a potentially raw form if anything is missing from the JSON. Not sure if anything is. and compare, or I have everything in JSON.
Are there hash mismatches that we don't yet know what causes them?
I don't know.
Also, I think one thing I noticed for other tests which were failing, where hashes are different, other parameters are different as well.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Gases. Like, let me just see the log.
So I'd say so as you're coming across these other failures, and if you can easily figure out what the mismatch is, like it's just obvious. You look at the output and you can see. If it's obvious the Nethermind is wrong, just go ahead and fix the Nethermind. If it's not obvious who's wrong, just share the difference in Telegram group, and we can then discuss and figure out whether the Geth should change or Nethermind should change.
Yeah,
I'm
one thing
guessing
I can see for every test is the size parameter is different for.
size. There's no
That's
size.
not part of the hash, I believe. So it's
And parent has as well.
parent
But I
hash.
think the
Parent hash is a
Oh,
problem. It's going to be a pain.
that's a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a pain to track down too. So for the parent hash one, I think we will have to dump blocks. Probably dump the parent block and compare, like in some sort of raw format, either RLP or maybe JSON. We might get lucky, be able to compare the JSONs.
Well,
But-
hold on, because it depends if the parent hash, which block's parent hash is wrong. Is it the base block, or is it a simulated block, or is it a
Yeah.
phantom block? Because like
Yeah.
it
I
might
guess
be that our phantom blocks have slightly different parameters,
Mhm.
or it could be that the parent block was simulated and it has a different block hash or not matching block hash, and because of that, every block after that will have weird parent hashes.
yeah, that's what I need to look into it. But the error that I was looking, what's the title of that?
I think the block size also interesting. Like why that is, and that's maybe easier to debug than the block hash.
Okay.
It could just be the two clients are calculating are defining size to mean different things, since it's not part of consensus. I mean, it's not part of consensus except for until it makes it to the RLP, but the size parameter might not be used in that calculation.
Yeah, that's why I would having RLP
Okay.
to debug would be probably the most conclusive.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll continue to fix some of the issues and work on this hash mismatch.
Okay.
There's some other issues that I'm also seeing is that gas mismatch. For our gas, it's saying the gas used is 0, but it should not be.
Interesting.
I would
That
first
sounds
try
like
to
a
fix.
bug.
Yeah, I would first try to fix those in a way that are clearly different, and only after that go to the block hashes, because those bugs also might be fixing the block hash issue.
Yep. Definitely the block hash mismatch last. Okay. Like I mentioned before, if you run into one where you're not sure if Nethermind is correct or not, just paste the details in the simulate Telegram room, and we can decide who's right, Geth or Nethermind.
Yes.
Don't just assume that Nethermind is wrong. It could be that Geth is wrong as well.
Yeah, exactly. And to add more to that, these tests were filled with a Geth client. So if we have a bug, then the tests themselves will be wrong. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me, or if you're not sure about the test, to Killari, and we'll get this sorted.
Sure. So whenever I see difference, I'll ping on Telegram.
Okay, anything else?
We still
I
have to
guess
make
we
a
didn't
decision.
decide. I guess we didn't decide anything on the gas estimation.
Yeah, gas estimation. We kind of punted.
It's something that we can continue discussing next week as well.
Oh yeah, I guess we're almost out of time. I think the thing to think about and maybe discuss in Telegram is just it sounds like everybody's in agreement. We do want this gas estimation. I feel mildly strongly that we should make it so whatever we're doing to estimate gas does return full, like a complete response. So that way users don't have to use estimate gas and a separate call to get data back. So like logs and revert reasons and return values, all those things should come with the estimate gas response if the user wants them at the very least, just so we're not unnecessarily adding load to the clients. I'm okay if everybody really wants to have a new method. I won't fight it hard. I have a mild preference for not versioning quite yet, but I can appreciate the arguments made for versioning sooner rather than later. And so I'd be okay with. We have a couple options. One, we can just do ETH simulate v2, and all it does is add estimate gas, or we could try to bundle up some other things. But as Sina mentioned, we're going to run into problems with, that might take another year, and we don't want to wait another year just to get gas estimation out. We could switch out over to another method, ETH simulate estimate gas. I think I would personally rather do a v2 instead of a separate method, just because the ETH simulate and ETH call are basically the same thing on the client. They're just different result sets. And going forward, it'd be nice if we could get rid of that whole concept and just have one method that does both things, because it's doing the same thing on the client in both cases. It's just maybe a configuration option in the parameters for what data you want returned or something like that. That'd be my preference. I'm happy to continue discussing this over Telegram, though.
I think if you make V2, then I don't know how difficult it would be to just add that feature and nothing else. And then if you add more features, then that would be V3. So that in a way would be somewhat fast to deploy new versions instead of kind of making a huge amount of changes for each version.
Yeah, I'm not totally opposed to it. I mean, the software we write over at Dark Forest, I mean, we're pretty aggressive with our versioning. We just put new major versions out every week or two, and so I don't mind that strategy.
Just one more ETH, I promise. Just one more.
It's always one more ETH.
But Ethereum doesn't go with the version numbers. We are still in the Ethereum 1. We should go with Ethereum 2.
Oh yeah, don't get me started on that. Okay, I think we're done for today. We'll continue talking about the gas estimation in Telegram, and then maybe next week we'll make a decision.
Yeah. Okay. See ya.
Sounds good. Talk to you guys.
See you guys later.